Hello, I'm back. Welcome to Heart and Mind with Dr. Dina McMillan. And yes, I'm Dr. Dina McMillan, unable to be here last week due to weather conditions. Are we having fun yet? Well, that has led the situation then, plus looking at the news, has led me to really want to provide you with really useful information. Information I actually had to use myself to dig myself out of the hole that I was in. So I hope you will stay here with me for this wonderful episode 74, Staying Grounded in a Time of Escalation, Part 1. Yes, here we go. Now, I have promised you no more boring Tuesdays, and I meant it because this show provides insights, keys, tools, solutions you will not find anywhere else. I'm not just giving you my opinion on politics. I'm not just giving you my views on relationships. I'm digging deep. I'm going into my research. I'm going into my training. And I'm providing you with insights that you need, we all need, to keep our lives on track, to improve things, and other people aren't telling you. I want you to see the strings of manipulation that we all need to identify and we all need to dodge. Now, why am I able to see those? Because I am a trained social psychologist. And that's what we do in social psychology. We study the brain, we study power dynamics. You can see how that would be useful. We study how people learn, how we're influenced and persuaded, manipulated and coerced, indoctrinated, and even the specifics of how people can be brainwashed. Now, none of us got away clean, even with the degrees. One of the things you will find by watching this show is that we are all vulnerable to being influenced, persuaded, and manipulated. I don't care how smart you are. I don't care how many degrees you have or don't have. The tactics that are used are highly effective. And my job is to show you what they are so that you can protect yourself and your loved ones from unfair influence. And that's what we do on this show. And speaking of unfair influence, I'm sure I don't need to tell this audience. I'm sure you all already have your copy of the Pfizer papers. This is the latest analysis of the clinical documents that Pfizer went to court to attempt to hide for 75 years. The courts said no. And so Dr. Naomi Wolf, Amy Kelly, and a whole team of highly qualified people grabbed those papers and spent years not only going through them and seeing what they had, but also translating that into plain language so even people without medical degrees or advanced degrees can understand what those studies found. It is dire. And if we all don't know what they did, when they do it again, we will not know how to protect ourselves. It will also, if you buy your copy, it will support the important work that we do here with Daily Cloud. We're bringing information to the world that is so necessary in this day and age. But I don't know about you, but when it comes time to pay my monthly bills, if I tell them I'm a good person, that does not get me through. Things have to be paid for. So please dig deep, support our work, get copies of the Pfizer papers. Don't just get a copy for yourself. Get a copy for everyone in your family, your friends, that smart aleck that you know that thinks they know everything, who keeps saying things that you know are just not true. It's wonderful to be able to actually point to something and say, actually, this is what it says, and it disputes everything you've been saying for the last 3 years. Don't you want to be able to do that? So get your copy of the Pfizer papers. You can simply go on Amazon and get your own copy. Now, today's topic, again, I don't know if I should apologize or just admit the truth. This topic is based on what I've been going through for like the past 10 days. I'm in Nashville, Tennessee. So now you know where I am. And we were the hardest hit city when it came to power outages due to the the storm they called Fern, the ice storm. I want to tell you, I'm new to Nashville, and I have never lived through anything like that. Yes, it was horrendous. Ice everywhere. Now, it looked like Winter Wonderland. It was so pretty. I have really changed how I'm going to be decorating my Christmas trees from now on because it was beautiful and deadly. It went down to -5 Fahrenheit in some places with no heat, no lights, no power. And as a newbie, I don't have a backup generator or any of those things. It was traumatizing. And it's the reason I wasn't able to broadcast last week. I had no power. And guess what? There are still tens of thousands of people in Nashville who still don't have power, and it's been more than a week. Elon Musk has nicely sent 500 generators to people who still don't have power. Of course, there have been people who've died, and we won't find out how many died until everything completely thaws, which it hasn't done yet. But all of that, plus watching the news of what's going on in Minnesota, I have a sister who lives in Minneapolis, and she's part of that. I don't know if she's involved in the protests because she doesn't speak to me since Trump won the election and she knew I backed him. But she and her family are very involved in that whole wokerati thing where they're always protesting anything, everything, and blaming it all on Trump. But she's also living in a place where, as cold as it was in Nashville, it was even colder and more bleak in Minneapolis. But looking at so it's not distant and over there. It's like, oh my goodness, I have family that's going to be affected by them blocking off streets and people getting shot and all of the nonsense going on that's being replicated in some other urban cities, including New York City. It gets to be overwhelming. So when you're seeing these things happening out in the world, and the world just seems like every day you open up your social media feed, because of course you can't get the real news off of mainstream media. You have to go to X if you want real news. If you're watching this on Facebook or some other medium or YouTube or whatever, you want real news in real time, go to X, get an X account. Because anybody that says something that's not backed by facts, they get community noted. They will put a note on it saying, that's not right, here's the right answer. Mainstream media, it's all playing in the same little playbook. They have a scripted playbook so you don't find out what's really going on. But every time you open it up, you see how much fraud there is. Now you're working hard, paying taxes, obeying the laws, and you're watching people come here from around the world and just openly steal billions of dollars from us, getting backhanders from the people we elected. It is so disheartening. I was just getting so down. I don't know about you. It was just like I literally wanted to go to bed and just put my blanket over my head. Something I did have to do during the blackout, by the way. But I just wanted to stay there. And I don't know if you're feeling the same way. And then I said, wait a minute, I know how to do this. Back in Melbourne, when I was living in Melbourne, Australia, I was in Melbourne for the whole COVID fiasco. And even after that, I was asked to write a course on resilience for the University of Technology in Sydney. So I did a lot of research on how you stay grounded, how do you keep from getting swept away by world events, because the COVID fiasco is a world event that affected all of us. How do you do that? So I went back in my research and I thought, with all that's going on right now, I need to share this with my audience. And as I started going through it, I realized it was a bit too much information for me to just put in one hour episode. So we're actually going to have two episodes with this crucial information. So do me a favor, know that I will be uploading it on my X feed at Dr. Dina1. Or you can go on Rumble and see every episode of this show. You can go to Daily Clout. That clout is spelled CLOUT, like you see on the screen, and see every episode of the show, or you can go on YouTube. And I'm asking you, get ready to push the screenshot button. Some of this information, you need to be able to remind yourself of it, but I figured everybody can just screenshot it if it's crucial, or you can watch it more than once. So I want you to be prepared. This is information that's going to help you keep your sanity, keep your calm, keep in control when the world seems like it's going insane. So I want you to stay with me for this. Did you know every major financial collapse has been preceded by the same 7 warning signs? Before the Great Depression, before the 1970s stagflation, before the crash of 2008. Now all 7 are flashing red again for the first time in over 15 years. American Alternative Assets just released a free report called the Bellwether Signal. It breaks down each of these signals and shows how to protect your retirement before the next wave hits. In times of uncertainty, gold has always been the ultimate safe haven. It held strong in 2008. It surged during the inflation crisis of the 70s, and it remains one of the few assets not tied to political manipulation or central bank policy. Find out why central banks are buying it in record amounts and how you can too. Call 855-803-GOLD or visit cloutgold.com to get your free copy of the Bellwether Signal. That's 855-803-GOLD or just go to cloutgold.com. Learn the signs, protect your savings, make your move while you still can. And I apologize, everyone, for the frozen screen. I had no way of knowing that the screen was frozen. This platform, all of these platforms that you see podcasts on, they upgrade every once in a while. And I have to say, every time they upgrade, there are bugs. Okay, so I do apologize about that. I hope you got the information. The Bellwether Signal is something we all need to read. I have a really close friend who used to work in financial advice, and he told me years ago about the importance of buying gold. So go to cloutgold.com and get your information. And again, I apologized for the frozen screen. See what I mean about things getting chaotic? Now, I want to just tell you something up front right now. This is going to be really interesting because I find it is unusual where people give information and cover all sides of politics. But this is heart and mind, not heart and mind from the conservative perspective or heart and mind from the left progressive perspective. This is about facts and information. So I want to tell you, first of all, today's not a political rally. It's designed to help you to navigate the current instability regardless of your political affiliation. So yes, I'm going to look at this from both sides. Okay, so we're going to look at how things are being done to escalate things, to make things just escalate, increase, feel chaotic, feel lost, how they're being done by conservatives, how it's being done by the left progressives. There is a lot going on both sides. To be fair, it's a bit like examining a relationship where there's violent abuse from one of the partners. Sure, there are problems on both sides. I cannot lie and say, well, both people have their faults. Now, we know one side is a lot more intense. But I told you I was going to show you the strings of manipulation. I don't want you to be manipulated by anybody, even if you see them as an ally. So we're going to look at both sides. And we know that something very crucial has shifted in the national mood. I have never seen, over the past 2 years, I've never seen America so divided. And there is constant escalation. Escalation meaning intensity without restraint. And it's not just occurring. Here's what's really making me very nervous. It's being encouraged. People are being encouraged. And in fact, it was interesting talking to someone today. I reminded him, he was telling me about a decision he was making. And I said, I tell people, and I do this myself, I don't make decisions when I'm highly emotional in heightened circumstances. I don't just tell other people that, I do that myself. But we are being encouraged to do exactly that. So I want you to be the ones in control and not some person out there who's making money off of us. So what are we looking at? Escalation. You really need to know that term. You need to really look out for it, because what it is, it's when emotion replaces judgment and restraint collapses. Now, any of you like J.D. Howdigan, who is brilliant, and I hope you follow him on social media. I've had him on the show. He's a brilliant, I couldn't call him a psychologist, sociologist, philosopher. He's just brilliant. He examines society and what's going on in society. And he's been warning about this on the left for a long time. But again, I don't want you to just be able to see it because it's so evidently being done on the left. I want you to see it if it's being done on the other sides too, on the right and in the middle. It is when people use your emotion to try to replace your judgment and get your restraint and ration and logic and problem solving to collapse and get you to not respond, but to react. And we're seeing a lot of that. And especially we're seeing that being whipped up and encouraged against ICE, against the enforcement of our laws against illegal migration. But it could have been against anything. Notice these people were against National Guard helping to make cities safer. They didn't want safer cities, okay? They don't care what it is. The people involved in this are part of a tribe where their tribal dance is to protest against someone, and they get recognition and accolades for being the most aggressive regardless of the cause. These are the same people who were protesting outside Tesla because somebody decided that Elon Musk was a fascist. He's not. He's the spaceman, but there you go. Now, there are, again, divisive factors on both sides, but there is no way I can objectively say it is anywhere close to being even. I see nowhere near the aggression, the negativity, the calls for violence from the right like I do from the left. The left has become so dangerous. They are pushing their people off a cliff. And I personally, I wonder this, and sign in wherever you are and give me your opinion. I think they're trying to push us to a civil war. Let me know if you think the same. Very much more likely. And in fact, even the reaction, look what happened when Rob Reiner died. He had nothing to say good about Trump or anybody that voted for Trump. No reasonable attitude at all, just negative, hatred. He and his wife get murdered by their mentally ill, addicted son. And I didn't see anybody celebrating. Charlie Kirk went to campuses and said, your belief system is not based on fact, and gave people the facts to dispute what they said, changing an enormous number of minds. They shot and killed him in front of his family, and the left celebrated like something really positive had happened, yelling, hey, yay, because they didn't like the fact that he was taking their ideology apart using facts and knowledge. So they celebrated when he's died. The people on the right don't do that. They're looking at it and saying, it's what a horrible thing to be killed by your child. To have a child with serious mental health issues and addiction issues like this, that's a terrible thing. He wasn't a nice guy. He was hateful to us, but we're not going to celebrate him getting murdered, he and his wife getting murdered. I can't say it's even close to being the same, but we are not perfect. The right is not perfect. And again, I keep saying this. I don't want you to be manipulated by anybody, whatever side they happen to be on. And the media is being used to trigger. Now, here's something. Please, somebody get me in contact with Elon, because this is a real problem. And even on Grok, which is the search engine and information and AI on X, I had to ask several times before I could get any kind of photos that showed what's going on in Minneapolis. Because if you just go on Google and you look at the protests in Minneapolis, they always make it look like the federal officers are the aggressors and the protesters are just peacefully standing there not doing anything. They don't show that these people are attacking the cars, the officers. They're attacking random people on the street. The violence is coming from the side of the protesters. But if you look at the imagery on Google or in even Grok, you rarely see that. You've really got to look for it. And this show, one of the reasons I have images and put so much time into putting slides together is because there's something called the visual superiority effect. You can also find it if you type in picture superiority effect. And it is found through studies that if you hear information or see information written and it's accompanied by a relevant graphic, you are significantly more likely to remember the information. So if you're wondering why people on the left have it so wrong about what's going on in these cities with the protesters against the federal agents, it's because these people are constantly being barraged with imagery that shows the federal agents being the aggressors, and it's just not true, but it's powerful. And we all have to be careful about that. But Elon, we still have some work to do in Grok. There's still too many woke people at Grok that are, I keep having to say, dig deeper, Grok, find objective information, find information on both sides. And it can be tough sometimes. I don't even expect that from Google. Google just won't give it to me. Grok, I can get it, but I have to really keep asking. So as a result of what is being portrayed in the left-wing media, which is the mainstream media, a lot of people feel actively threatened right now. And when any of us feel endangered, our ability to reason narrows, declines, erodes. And if it lasts over time, you start walking through your life and making choices in a fugue state where your neocortex, your problem-solving, logical, rational brain is just asleep. And they do this on purpose because people in this kind of a state can easily be triggered to act in whatever way the elites that are controlling them want them to behave. And what happens with all this high arousal? Now, all of us can identify with this. I was just talking about, moving to a city when the last 4 years where I've lived, winter meant wearing sleeves. Okay. So here we have below zero. I had to change my phone because I kept it in Celsius. I had to change it to Fahrenheit because it was so depressing seeing every day that I wake up that the high is going to be -8. I just couldn't take it. So I turned it to Fahrenheit. And then you have an ice storm that's like they haven't seen for 30 years. all of us. And then we turn on the news and we see we're being robbed blind by all of these foreigners who come in and get all of these benefits that Americans aren't getting. We recognize now why every time we go to a gas station or a small chain store, it's all owned by foreigners who don't speak English well. Why aren't Americans being given the opportunity to be business owners like this? It's been taken and used by foreigners, and they tell each other how to do it. And we have the child care centers and all of that. Those billions taken by the Somalis is just a tiny, tiny bit of the foreigners who are robbing us blind. And then we look when a disaster happens in the city I live in now. I've been here for a couple of months. It was handled so poorly. I'm considering running for mayor. It was done so poorly. And they had years to prepare for this, and they just didn't do it. They were doing other things, lots of DEI courses. OMG. So I'm feeling overwhelmed. As you can tell, this has not been my most serene time. So what does it do? It puts you in a state of high arousal, anger, fear, outrage, panic. A lot of us are feeling that. Again, high arousal degrades judgment and increases aggression. So while my temptation was, as soon as my power came on, I was tempted to look and go online and see how much it would cost me to move to Florida. I reminded myself I'm not supposed to do that. My judgment's not good. When you're in a state where everything's frozen and you can't even go outside, that's not a time to make decisions. But it doesn't matter how smart you are. High arousal degrades our judgment. We have to be really careful about any decision we make. That's why we shouldn't make them. For the most part, don't make anything. But if you're in a high threat situation and have to make an immediate decision to take care of that threat, that's different. If you have to get blankets or get a generator or whatever you have to do in that situation, stay safe in Minnesota, not take certain streets. But don't make any huge decisions while you're still in that high arousal state, because your judgment, it's just not going to be as strong. Escalation, and here's another thing that happens. When people are being purposely triggered, and we've done shows, if you look at the shows that we've had of Heart and Mind with Dr. Dina McMillan on the woke, why are people woke? There are 3 episodes on why are people woke. And we talk about the fact that the methods used and the ideology used by the left progressives is extremely appealing to people with cluster B personality disorders. And they love being out in front. They love being the center of attention. They love it when everybody's looking at them. What happens to normal people in those situations, though, is they tend to get quiet and kind of hide and kind of hang back and say, okay, I will wait until everything settles down to see how I'm supposed to behave and what's going to happen. But we cannot afford to leave our society to people with real personality disorders or even psychoses. We can't afford to leave mentally ill people in charge of our culture and our society, which is what we've been doing for the last more than 20 years. Anybody that was noisy and loud and claimed they were right and morally virtuous, most of us were like, well, we don't want to get in a conflict with them because, they'll get really aggressive. So let's just stand back. We can't afford to do that. We keep leaving the public spaces to the highly emotional people. And at the same time, your emotions are not being left alone. You're being recruited into outrage. So much of what happens and how it's being presented. Think about what I just said about trying to find photos of what's going on in Minneapolis that doesn't show the federal officers as the aggressive bad guys. That's not what's happening. And you can see that from their cameras, from their footage. When they're wearing body cams. So they're showing exactly what's happening, but that's not what's out there in the media. The media is only taking a little edited piece that shows that the federal agents are the bad guys. Just not true. So you're being recruited into outrage. So the people that are already left progressive, the people that are already recruited into believing that the federal government is bad, that anybody that voted for Trump is bad, that they're all out to get you. They're giving the microphone to anybody who exaggerates, saying, I'm afraid to even take my kids to school. Why? You're American citizens. If they came and said, hey, look, we're taking out the illegals, you're not illegal. Why are you worried? They're not going to do anything to you. A child gets left behind by his illegal father running away, and they make it like the federal agents just went and grabbed the child. And they're still saying that. They will absolutely lie. They will know they're lying. Why? They're recruiting their followers into a state of outrage so that their judgment is gone and so that they can inspire them to act. But there's a high cost of doing this to your people, whether it's their side, our side, or any middle side. There's a high price. Escalation and division, we all pay for it. It causes chronic stress, emotional exhaustion, feelings of hopelessness. You become hypervigilant. You're afraid to trust. You become highly cynical about everything. Walking around like that, it's not healthy. It ruins our relationships. It lowers productivity. It ruins creativity. Protection requires being able to identify and understand the tools that are being used to inflame and divide you. So we're going to quickly go through these. And as I said, I apologize for the fact that it's quick, but this is only a 1 hour show. And since it's recorded, you can always watch it again and you can always screenshot it. Okay. But this is such key information. Once I went over it again, I said, it will be so unfair if I don't share this with people. Now, here's how the factors that will trigger escalation, trigger you acting emotionally, your emotions getting involved, your primal drives. Remember, primal drives, hypothalamus, that's fear, that's anger, that's tribalism. All of that gets, the sexual desire, hunger, all of it gets triggered by escalation. When things are happening and it seems like everything's exploding, that part of your brain absolutely wakes up. So here are some factors that trigger escalation: absolutist language, moral labeling, public shaming, and threat framing. Now, I wanted to be able to show you what these are. So you'll notice the first two are in bold and the second two are not. The second two are not in bold because we're going to talk about them next week. So let's look at absolutist language. It's marked by totalizing terminology. Always, never, everyone, no one. Absolute moral certainty with no gray spots. So it's black, white, no gray. And binary framing, everything is either godly or evil. It leaves no room for nuanced trade-offs or legitimate disagreement. Have any of you ever tried to talk to a fervent vegetarian or vegan where they talk about you eating flesh, or you talk about somebody like what my sibling did when I posted about honoring Charlie Kirk's contribution, because I like him using facts to dispute, not name calling, not hyperbole, using facts to dispute leftist ideology, actually showing people things they could look up themselves and see were true. I wanted to honor his life, and I put that episode, I advertised the episode that I was doing on Heart and Mind. I advertised it on Facebook, and she went on and just listed all the name calling that anybody's ever called him. Racist, misogynist, blah, 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 blah. And then when people who like Charlie Kirk responded to what I posted, she went out of her way to write these long mission statements, trying to get them not to watch the show, not to listen to anything I had to say. I had to block her from Facebook. That is the absolutist. He's a racist. He's a this. Anytime you see somebody being called that, that's absolutist language. And remember, it's designed to escalate things. It's designed to trigger you. It's designed to make you pick a tribe. You're either with us or against us. Now, here's how we use, because I say we, because I know, I admit I'm a conservative. However, I'm a conservative social scientist. So I see it when we flub up too. So here's some conservative language that has moral absolutes. When we say things, abortion is always murder. Whether you believe it or not, that's absolutist language. There's no such thing as systemic racism. That's another thing I hear a lot. America was founded on Christian values, period. And Naomi Wolf has gone through a lot of trouble to research on the fact that America was actually founded on godly values, not necessarily strictly Christian values, but there you have it. The Constitution is clear and non-negotiable. Well, we wouldn't have amendments if it was non-negotiable. But again, this is absolutist language. It's designed to make you pick a team. And Fantasy Football Deer versus Truckers says, hi, Dr. Dina. Hello, how are you? So let's look at again, I'm being fair. Nobody could say, oh, she only talks about the wrongs on one side. No, I'm looking at this. This is absolutist language. It leaves no room for negotiation. Here's some absolutist language. There was too many to list, but here we go for the left progressives. Love is love. So any kind of relationship is equal in health and social acceptability to every other kind. Okay? Silence is violence. We hear that a lot. You're either anti-racist, according to their anti-racist policies, or you are a racist. There's no valid reason to oppose gender-affirming care. Now, here's another example of absolutist language from conservatives: identity and belonging. If you don't love this country, you should leave it. Real Americans believe in personal responsibility. Patriots support the police without exception. Agree or not? Remember, we're talking about a definition, absolutist language. In something comparable for the left progressives is identity and power. All police are complicit. Every institution is built on oppression. If you benefit from the system, you're part of the problem. Another example, absolutist language from conservatives regarding government and power. Big government always fails. Socialism never works anywhere, ever. The free market solves everything, all social problems. From the left progressives, it's more about justice and policy. If you look at the comparable area, if we had the same category, and they say borders are inherently immoral. Capitalism is violence. Speech that offends is not free speech. More absolutist language from conservatives. If we took it as like a media headline, took what is being said and made a media headline out of it, it would say the left wants to destroy America. Democrats are coming for your freedoms. Woke ideology is poisoning our schools. Absolutist language, also media type, headline type from the left progressives. America is fundamentally broken. Anyone who questions the left narrative is on the wrong side of history. Opposition equals hate. Okay, now screenshot this because it's kind of small, but here is the shared patterns across both sides. So we have the moral binary, identity sorting, total blame, no gray areas, dehumanization, and I have examples of both from the conservatives and from the left progressives. We don't tend, you notice ours don't tend to be as angry, absolute, but they're still there. Remember, absolutist language, it doesn't give anybody room to come across. So we have to be very careful about using it. Now, why do people use absolutist language? Because it mobilizes supporters quickly. It suppresses nuance and policy trade-offs. So it makes you say, We absolutely have to do this. It motivates you to go full throttle. And it clearly differentiates between us and them. But at the same time, absolutist language escalates conflict by framing disagreement as moral failure. It discourages any kind of dialogue. It makes it almost impossible. If you eat meat and you're talking to somebody who tells you that you're eating flesh and eating beef is the same as eating children, how can you have a conversation with this person? There's no middle ground. It discourages dialogue, especially across ideological lines. It's effective rhetorically. I mean, it really works. It sounds powerful and strong and it gets attention. But if you base policies off of it, it is extremely costly and divisive. Absolutist language impacts trust and increases polarization. It pushes people onto separate teams, and the teams keep getting further and further apart. Now let's talk about the second category that I said we were going to talk about today, moral labeling. It assigns a moral label, good, bad, evil, virtuous, corrupt, compassionate, or cruel to people or positions instead of engaging their arguments or evidence. This is calling Trump a fascist, calling Elon a fascist. You know, the fascist word is used so often, most people don't even know what a fascist is. When people have been interviewed about, oh, you say that Trump is a fascist, well, what does he do that's fascist? And what's so hypocritical, these are the same people that wanted anyone who refused the COVID vaccine to be pushed out of society and not even be able to get health care. I know we've all looked online and seen people who work in healthcare who say, I won't treat someone who voted for Trump, or if I find out they voted for Trump, I'm going to give them insufficient amounts of anesthesia so that they feel pain. People have actually lost jobs for being so not only absolute, but morally labeling people because they have different beliefs without even, most of the time, even fully understanding what those beliefs are. Here's how we, on the conservative side, morally label people. We label opponents as morally corrupt or dangerous. The radical left is evil. Democrats hate America. This agenda is immoral. They are corrupt to the core. Come on, we've said it. Admit, confess. Here's how the left progressives do it. Basically, somebody made this some years ago during the, 2019, 2018, and I saved a copy of it and used it often because you see it often. You saw with the poster that I just showed you where she had Trump on one side and Adolf Hitler on the other. Everyone I don't like is Hitler. So this is what the left progressives say. Everybody who is not one of them is morally harmful or regressive. Conservatives are fascist or Nazis. Their policies are cruel. Opposition to us equals hate, and everything they believe is violence. Even just not reacting at all and taking time to think about it. Silence is violence is what they constantly say. Somebody wrote bulging battery. Somebody wrote about Jeffrey Epstein. Yeah, we can do a whole show about what Epstein was up to, how he was part of a concerted effort to destroy America, and it included the groundwork for child transition and gender ideology. Yeah, but let's talk about that next time. Pay attention to this because we need to know this. Okay, all of us need to know this. Here's how moral labeling goes for conservatives. When we label ourselves as morally upright, we stand for family values. We are on the side of life. We defend freedom and faith. We represent common sense and decency. Well, the left does the same thing. We're on the right side of history. We stand for justice and equity. We lead with compassion. We protect the vulnerable. So both sides think they are on the moral correct side. Who's going to come out a winner in this? Here's more moral labeling by conservatives. Here's character-based moral judgments. Those people, meaning left progressives, have no morals. They're grooming children. They want to destroy the family. They want to destroy our society. Okay? What they say about us, and I had to put a picture of the lovely Ashley Shackelford in her professionally appropriate outfit, embarrassing all Black women everywhere. What it says, in case you can't see it, all white people are racist. And she went on to say in this talk how white people are basically demonic. And white people paid her to stand there and say that. And I don't know if you can see it. If you screenshot it and make it larger, you can see that if you want to get rid of your guilt because you're white, she has a PayPal identifier there, so you can actually just send her some money. So here's some moral labeling from the left progressives. If you oppose our beliefs, you're a bigot. That's racist, full stop. Conservatives are complicit in oppression. Oh, you can see how this divides people where there's just like no room to move. So here's some media headline type ways of expressing this from the conservatives. The moral collapse of the left. Why conservatives are the last defenders of values. Woke ideology is rotten at its core. Now, I don't care. You may be on either side and you may agree with some of this, but understand the power and the danger in thinking in such absolute terms. It doesn't give us any ground to walk across and deal with somebody who thinks differently. Here's left progressives. Why neutrality is immoral. So they aren't just against conservatives, they're also against centrists or anybody that says, I don't agree with you on that particular point. They see that as immoral. You're just as much an enemy as somebody that's full out against them. Silence enables harm. So again, with the silence is violence, silence is hurting. Anybody that doesn't come out for them is acting to not only disagree with them, but to harm them. So if they get violent and aggressive and destructive, then that makes that self-defense. Do you see how that works? If silence is violence, then you being not saying anything when I claim Black Lives Matter and I hit you, your silence was violence. So I can tell myself that was self-defense. Society can't function like this. Okay, but here we go. Those who oppose us are standing in the way of justice. They see their way as the only way of being just. Again, this is something to screenshot. It shows the moral labeling patterns on both sides, okay? And if you look at it, seeing yourself as the defenders of values or the champions of justice, it's that sort of thing. Now, why moral labeling is so effective? People wouldn't use it if it didn't work. Let's just be honest about that. It simplifies complex policy disputes into moral identity tests. So you're with us or against us. You have to believe we're right. You tell yourself you're right. And if somebody on your side does something terrible, you can say they had to do it because morally we're justified. It signals group membership very quickly. It shuts down debate. Without appearing anti-discussion, you're saying, how can anybody even think about doing this? And I want to tell you something. When I've been talking to young women who've been taught that reproductive health is all about being able to get an abortion on demand up until birth of the child. When they talk about it, I can see the indoctrination because they get this rabid look in their eyes that is completely inappropriate to have a discussion about it. And when somebody gets that look in their eyes, whatever side they're on, don't try to discuss anything with them because they are just not open to it. And if you actually dissemble and you start to dismantle their argument, you'll see what they'll get violent. You'll see what Charlie went through. You'll see what Riley Gaines went through when she went to talk about the problems with allowing males on female sports teams and in female change rooms, and she was attacked. They didn't have a viable argument, so they'll attack you. And you're risking that on an individual level. So you have to be very careful. And this sister that I said was making all these comments, she's kind of hysterical. Most of the time, people don't argue with her because they just don't trust how she'll respond. A lot of them are like that. It's a kind of what's known as a cluster B hysteria. If they don't get support that they think they're entitled to, they often get very aggressive. They're quite dangerous. But moral labeling shuts down debate and it raises the emotional stakes, especially online. People get all whipped up. They get all enthused. But moral labeling also reduces trust, encourages dehumanization. The left progressives do not see Trump as a human being. People who voted for him see him as a man. They admire a lot of what he does. Most people disagree with at least something that he does or something that he says. We see him as a human being. They don't. They see him as an icon, and a destructive icon that is coming for them. And that the reason is the tools that we're talking about with the moral labeling, with the absolutist language. They are presenting Trump as a thing, not a person. And it makes it easier for people to have very extreme reactions to him. And moral labeling also turns disagreement into character judgment. When you morally label somebody, anybody that disagrees with me is evil, that's a serious character judgment, and that's what it does. Here's something I want you to also take a screenshot of, because this is moral labeling versus moral reasoning. Moral reasoning is saying, I don't disagree with this. I don't agree with this because, or yes, you're right about that, but what about this? That's moral reasoning. The dimension, focus, moral labeling is who someone is. You are a Trump supporter, so you are evil. Moral reasoning says what someone does. Okay? Moral labeling looks at your character. If you are not with me, your character's terrible. Moral reasoning says, okay, let's look at your policies, your action, your impact, the tone, condemnatory. Moral labeling is just aggressive and hateful, where moral reasoning, evaluative. It looks and says, okay, moral reasoning allows me to have friends who vote differently than I do or have different lifestyles. Because I reason, okay, let's go point by point. There's no debate with moral labeling, none. I'm willing to debate anything. I will look things up. Somebody says, I have a source that says that's not true. I will actually look it up. And the outcome is complete polarization. The problem with moral labeling is it results in complete polarization. Us and them, they are the enemy. We are the good guys. And where moral reasoning allows some deliberation, although we have to be tough. Moral reasoning is no excuse for moral weakness. And that's something we can talk about another time. Moral reasoning, what it is, it evaluates actions, outcomes, trade-offs, and principles without assigning moral identity. It asks, what do you believe about this? What do you believe about that? Now, of course, moral reasoning relies on you dealing with somebody who's going to tell you the truth. What happens sometimes is we have certain groups who have a norm, and a cultural policy of being allowed to lie and deceive. That is very dangerous. But moral reasoning with just two normal people or two normal groups, it keeps morality focused on the effects of what you're asking for and the values that you're advocating for, and not just a condemnation of people. The different in the language, this policy risks, or the ethical concern here is, or one consequence of that may be, and we should weigh X against Y. That's what moral reasoning does. Moral reasoning, it has a function. It preserves values and dialogue. It allows disagreement without delegitimization. So you're not saying you don't have a right to feel that way, you're an evil person. It's saying, okay, what do you believe? Let's weigh it up. Let's think about it. Let's talk about it. It encourages accountability and evidence. With moral reasoning, whoever has the strongest evidence wins, basically. And that's one of the reasons I believe that the left is so against moral reasoning, because as somebody who took 7 out of my 9 years in college in research analysis and statistical analysis, 90% of what they advocate for does not come out well. I became a social psychologist once I learned to interpret studies and research and experiments, and I started evaluating what was being advocated on the left by the left progressives. And I saw the damage that it would cause. I saw the poor foundation that was being used to advocate for it, and I became more conservative. Moral reasoning is something good to have. Again, though, moral reasoning does not mean you give in. It does not mean you are weak. You have to be willing to stand up and say no. But some benefits, it de-escalates conflict. Being willing to actually listen to somebody else, genuinely listen. It can de-escalate conflict. It broadens your reach. You're able to reach more people. If you can separate things out and say, okay, we disagree on this clump, but we agree on this clump. Let's see about how we can get this clump to go. It broadens your reach. People don't see you as so scary. They're willing to talk to you. It improves the quality of the decisions. It increases trust and legitimacy. But one thing that they don't talk about, moral reasoning has to be based on factual evidence. Otherwise, it's just ideals. And you can't really debate ideals because they're not based on anything but what you want to be true. What happens with moral reasoning? It de-escalates the conflict. It de-escalates the situation of crisis. And it can work without weakening your values. It does not dilute conviction. It does not concede moral ground. It doesn't require you to be neutral. You have to be, moral reasoning requires also strong principles and moral fortitude. You got to be strong. You've got to be willing to say, I get your points about this, but I have this bit of evidence, this and this. And so my answer, even after discussing it with you, is still no. You got to be strong. It redirects morality from identity to impact. So you're talking about, let's not do this, but not you are a bad person. It replaces condemnation with actively evaluating the situation. It shifts that complete concrete certainty that you're always right to justification through evidence. See the difference? Again, I'm bringing up Charlie Kirk because he did this brilliantly. It's especially effective in public education, legal and regulatory contexts, media commentary, which we are not getting from mainstream media at all, high conflict facilitation, and professional and government settings. The moral reasoning and the de-escalation is a fundamental part of my Healing the Rift program. So I have it here. I call it a transformative anti-bias initiative that significantly improves morale and collaboration. So it is based on moral reasoning. We say no to this because, or the evidence says we should do it a different way, but not You disagree with me, so you're bad. So teaching people how to use logic and ration and and de-escalation and moral reasoning instead of that absolutist language and that moral labeling. When people use that in a context where you have a group of people and they disagree, you will never get to something workable. And I don't want that, which is why I put my program together. Now, for yourself, here's something you can resist. You can resist outrage on command. So when you see absolutist language, when you see somebody trying to trigger you through moral outrage, stand back, take a breath, get calm, and say, okay, they're trying to get a reaction from me. Let me think about it. Mirrored hostility and violence. We don't have to get violent just because they do, but we do have to protect ourselves. Don't sacrifice your core values no matter what they say. And don't refuse to learn. Keep being willing to learn. And as the world becomes more chaotic, put effort into remaining grounded, calm, reasonable. Tell yourself, this too shall pass. Now, if you have questions and comments, go on at Dr. Dina 1 and leave me a question or a comment. Go on Rumble, Daily Cloud, even on my X feed, because I'm going to put a recording of this on my X feed. Now, if you would like to book me in through any of my work, through my Unmasking the Abuser, my Healing the Rift, even my Gambling Harm education, here is my agent. Screenshot this. Contact me through my agent, or you can go on my website and see all of the many things that I do, and then you can find out whether I should work with you. I would love to work with any of you. My audience is brilliant. So thank you so much for being here. I hope you have lots of questions. Come back for part 2, because I'll have even more tools to keep you sane in these insane times. Thanks so much. I'll see you next week.